guys wash their hair, all of a sudden, just by closing their eyes, they've shut off the visual system and they lose their balance. I don't have that issue. I don't have any hair to wash, so I'm fine. But other people, if they're washing their hair, we recommend putting a shower chair in the bathroom so that they can sit down when they wash their hair, just an added safety measure. So this is something we look at when we go into every older adult's home and take a look at that bathroom setup. And we always recommend, if you don't have a stool or a chair set up in your shower already, we make that recommendation. So that's the visual system. The vestibular system, and this is just a picture here. That's our outer ear. That blue system there in the middle, that's your vestibular system. That's your inner ear. What that system does is it communicates with your brain to let your brain know which direction your head's turning. So if you're looking one way or the other, up or down, it communicates that with your brain. Has anyone in here ever dealt with vertigo before? There's some hands. This system's malfunctioning when you're dealing with vertigo. That's what's going on. And you get that spinning sensation because there's a miscommunication between your inner ear or your vestibular system and your brain. So your brain's thinking, you might be looking up when you're actually looking down, or vice versa, whatever. But it sends a crazy signal when you get that feeling of that spinning, the room spinning, or a merry-go-round, something like that. But this system, again, it deteriorates over time. The feedback from the inner ear to the brain, that system deteriorates over time. And also, as we age, we're more likely to develop different types of disorders that impact the vestibular system. Issues like BPPV, which is benign paroxysmal positional vertigo, Meniere's disease, and there's a whole plethora of other things that could impact the vestibular system. And next we got the musculoskeletal system, and this is the system that we deal with most in therapy. And we're talking your muscles, your bones, your joints, okay, your skeleton. And muscle strength obviously plays a vital role in being able to support our body, keep our body upright. And it's estimated that every decade after we turn 50, every decade we lose about 10% of our muscle mass. Now, that can obviously be impacted through exercise. So if we're exercising, a lot of people think that we can't build strength once we turn a certain age. I'm 75. What's the point of exercising? I can't get stronger. And that is absolutely 100% false. We can always build muscle. Okay? We can always get stronger. But part of that age-related change is our muscle mass is going to deteriorate over time. But we can combat that through exercising. Okay? And the CDC recommends that we participate in at least 30 minutes of moderately intense strength training 2 times per week. So strength training could be with weights, with bands, it could be body weight exercise, anything like that. I'll ask a rhetorical question. I won't ask for a show of hands, but just ask yourself, am I doing this? Am I getting 60 minutes of moderately intense resistive exercise per week? If the answer to that is no, figure out how you can do that. Can you yourself do that? Do you need to reach out to someone like myself, a physical therapist? Do I need to go to a gym and get set up with an exercise plan? Think about that, because that's one of the biggest things we can do to help ourselves, not only from a balance standpoint, but just from a general well-being. Okay. And the last system is our somatosensory system. So this is our body's awareness of its position in space. The best way to explain this system is to say if I was walking outside and I stepped in a hole in the ground and my ankle turned. What happens is there's a very, very fast response in our ankle that communicates all the way up to our brain, and it says, hey, brain, your ankle's turning out. You need to do something quickly to fix that before you fall. So our brain sends a message back down and says, hey, ankle, you need to turn yourself back in before you end up rolling your ankle and tripping. Now, again, as we age, this system, which is our nervous system, our nerves that relay messages from our muscles to our brain, that system slows down naturally over time. Again, it's just part of aging. But there's some diseases out there that cause that system to decay even faster. Diabetes is the big one. And so many of us as older adults develop diabetes, and then along with it, peripheral neuropathy. So if you have neuropathy, if your doctors talk to you about that, or if you're diabetic and you haven't heard of neuropathy, it's when you start to notice some loss of sensation in your hands or feet. You can get some pins and needle type sensation as well. Neuropathy, it's a disease where it attacks your nerves, and the speed that your nerves send signals to your brain is slowed down. So it can really affect the somatosensory system, which again can lead to falls. So what we look at from a balance standpoint is we look at all those systems to see how those systems are performing and what needs to be adjusted. And then that's going to lead us into our kind of gold standard for fall prevention, and really what every older adult should be doing, at least on an annual basis, to improve their safety at home. Okay, and this is what it looks like. So there's a ton of research out there that found at the very least, at the absolute least, every older adult should be participating in an exercise plan. They found that a robust exercise plan has helped to reduce the risk for falls. Okay, but on top of that, they list these 4 things as being the gold standard for fall prevention. Okay, the very first thing is an annual visual assessment. So we talked about that, the vision system playing a role. Our vision changes over time. We know that. So you could have a certain prescription when you turn 68. Fast forward, now you're 78. That prescription may have changed. It might not be the best prescription for you anymore. That's why it's important to get this annual assessment to make sure you have the most accurate prescriptions. An environmental assessment, which we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about what an environmental assessment looks like. But going through your home and having a checklist and looking through to make sure that your home is set up safely. Okay. A medication review. A medication review can be huge. And what I recommend to everybody is that you take your list of medications every time you go to your primary care doctor. And this might already be happening with some folks. And if you're a caregiver with your loved one, be that advocate for them. Make sure that you are reviewing that med list at all your appointments and asking, is this med list up to date? Is this everything I should be taking? Is there anything on this list that could be counteracted with another medication that I'm taking? And lastly, can any of these medications be taken away? A lot of times we'll see people who are on medications long term, and those medications just never got revisited. And then, in all reality, they're medications that they might be able to get off of. So ask that question. We use the term polypharmacy a lot. And polypharmacy is the idea of someone being over-medicated, being on too many medications. Or they may need to be on those medications, but they're at an increased risk of falling because of it. And polypharmacy is defined as being on anything more than 4 medications. And those are 4 prescription medications. So your vitamins, over-the-counter, Advils, stool softeners, whatever, those don't count towards that. These are actual prescription medications. So if that's you or if that's your loved one, think about that. Make sure you're posing those questions at your next doctor's appointment. The big thing with that leads to a lot of falls in older adults is a topic or a condition called hypotensive lose the definition. But what happens is when we go to stand up, our blood pressure bottoms out, and orthostatic hypotension. I knew it would come. And it's often tied to medications that we're taking. It's a pretty common side effect to a lot of medications. So it's always good to review that medication list to make sure that we're on all the things that we need to be, and we're not too much. And lastly, an exercise program, which we had already talked about. At least 60 minutes of resistive exercise, moderate intense resistive exercise. Okay. So that's the gold standard for fall prevention. So if you're not doing those 4 things, those are 4 things that you can take away today and implement for you, for your loved one, to help them stay safe at home. Does anyone have any questions about either the 4 systems or the gold standard for fall prevention before we move on? Questions? Yeah.
The vestibular system,
Mhm.
How does one determine whether that's functioning correctly? Is there like a test or something?
Yeah, that's a good question. If the people online didn't hear that, she had asked how we can test to know that the vestibular system is functioning properly or accurately. There's clinical tests that we can do. There's a whole plethora of clinical tests that we can do and observe. But then on top of that, there's actual studies that can be done too to look to see if the vestibular system is working appropriately. And there's a whole group of medical professionals that are going to work together to figure that out. So if someone's having like a vertigo issue, that would be the time to look at that vestibular system and see if something playing a role here. So there's some tests that the physical therapist can do, but then if it's outside of their scope, then there's going to be a neurologist involved, an ENT involved. So typically you would know if something's going on. That would clue in to begin that process of all those professionals getting involved. But there's a whole slew of different tests that can be performed to look into that. Thank you. You're welcome. Any other? Yes.
Can you be more explicit about what resistant exercise is? Is that with the rubber bands? I mean, what's the principle that it's different than running or playing badminton?
Yeah.
It's actual, you would have to focus on pulling? Is that?
Yeah. So she had asked, again, for people listening online, she had asked to go into more detail about what resistive exercise would look like. And what resistive exercise is, you're right, it's not running, it's not playing badminton. That would be considered a cardio or endurance type of exercise. Resistive training would be any exercise that would involve pushing or pulling of weights. So like squats, heel lifts, anything with bands, things like that would be resistive exercise. Anything that you're using that requires some type of movement along with it. So some type of movement with weights, some type of movement with bands, anything like that would be resistive exercise.
Where you feel a pull?
Yeah. Yep. You're pulling something.
Or
Yeah.
pushing?
Or pushing something. Exactly. Yeah, but not swimming.
Yeah. Okay.
Or walking or running. Exactly. Yep. Good question. What else do you guys have? Any other questions before we move on? Okay, so next I'm going to pull up a couple of these resources here. And if I was more tech savvy, I'd have them embedded right in. I'm going to sneak out and pull them each up individually. So this one is a checklist. These are all resources provided by what is called STEADY. STEADY is a whole program that was released by the CDC a few years ago, and it's a campaign to help with falls for the older adult. And they have, if you can type in their web address online, just look up CDC Steady, STEADI, and you'll get all kinds of resources. There's tons of stuff on there. I tried to bring with me what I thought would be most helpful, most appropriate for you guys. So this one is a checklist. Some of these questions may or may not only be able to be answered by your healthcare professional, but there's a lot of good checklists on here to get an idea of where you're at as far as a fall risk goes. So it might be kind of tough to see for some people here in the room or online, but ask for your fall history. Have you had any falls in the last year? Or are you worried about falling, or do you feel unsteady on your feet? Some different medical conditions, like problems with heart rates or arrhythmias like AFib. Do you have any type of cognitive impairment, incontinence, depression, foot problems? Those are all things that they look at for risk for falls. And then if we scroll down, here we get into the medications. So this is why it's important to look at these medications with your healthcare, your primary care provider. Psychoactive medications, if you're taking any opioids, as that can impair cognitive function. Medications that can cause sedation or confusion, and medications that can cause hypotension. So you yourself may not know the answer to some of those questions, or you as a loved one may not know. So this is something you could even take with you to your next appointment and ask these questions to your primary care provider. If we have time at the end, I'm going to show a couple of these tests, gait strength and balance, if we have time, so you can even do these tests at home and have an idea of how you perform and how you stack up, and if you're at risk for falls. Here they talk about vision. Have you had an eye exam in the last year? And there's the postural hypotension that we talked about as well. So this one's more of a screen to be done with healthcare providers, but I wanted to talk about it briefly, just so everyone would have kind of an idea of what sort of things put you at risk for falls. Questions about this form at all? The other two are a little more pertinent. So this is a questionnaire. Let me see if I can zoom in on that a little bit. That's a little better. There we go. So this is a questionnaire that is designed to be filled out by the actual individual. So again, by yourself, if you're the older adult, or if you're a caregiver, giving it to your loved one to fill out. So it's a questionnaire, and if you score more than 4 points, you're at a heightened risk for falls, and you should take an active measure to do something about it. So the very first question: I have fallen in the past year, and that carries a value of 2 points. The first two are both worth 2 points. I use or have been advised to use a cane or walker to get around safely. Okay, so both of those carry a value of 2. So if you said yes to both of those, you're already at a score of 4. Sometimes I feel unsteady when I'm walking. I steady myself by holding on to furniture when walking at home. I am worried about falling. Okay, so think about those. And again, I'm not going to ask anyone to answer those, but just kind of think about where you may rank, or where a loved one that you know may rank with some of these. I need to push up with my hands to stand from a chair. I have some trouble stepping up onto a curb. I often have to rush to the toilet. I have lost some feeling in my feet. I take medicine that sometimes makes me feel lightheaded more than usual. I take medicine to help me sleep or improve my mood. And lastly, I often feel sad or depressed. Those last couple questions are geared towards your medications. But if you wouldn't mind, just to show of hands, if there was one thing that stuck out to you on there, or that you think would stick out to a loved one. Was there one thing that was on there that you would have said yes to? Yeah. Yeah. See a couple head nods. So that's a pretty valuable questionnaire. And again, if you scored more than 4 on that as we went through that, or if you think a loved one would have scored more than 4, that's indicative of an increased risk for falls, and that you should take immediate action. So then the question would obviously be, what is immediate action? What does that look like? And I think that would, at the very least, be a conversation with your primary care provider to say, I feel like I'm at an increased risk for falls. What should I do about it? What would you recommend? And then having a conversation and going from there. It might be, if you aren't doing one of those 4 things from the gold standards checklist, implementing those to make sure that you're doing those things. It might be setting up an exercise program. Whatever you're not doing as part of these things would be something to implement immediately. So questions about the questionnaire at all? Yes.
Why would being sad or depressed make you prone to fall?
Yeah, good question. She had asked why being sad or depressed would increase your risk for falling, and that is geared more towards medications. If you're some of the medications that are out there to treat depression and anxiety have side effects to make someone more drowsy, more tired, and they've been tied to an increased risk for falls. So it's not the actual mood of being sad or depressed that leads to the fall. It's the medication that might be treating that.
Well, why wouldn't the question then be, are you taking medication because you're sad or depressed?
That I'm not super sure of. I'm not sure if they're trying to tease that out to someone who might not connect the medication that they're on.
Right.
Someone who might not understand that I'm taking that medication because I'm unhappy or because I'm depressed. So that might be why they worded it like that. That would be my guess. Good question. Jill?
Did you say we could get this form somewhere?
Yeah, so if you go to the CDC Steady website, STEADI, this brochure, all of these brochures that I have pulled up can be found on. Absolutely. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. What other questions? Were there any other questions online, Jill?
No, we have not had anybody question anything yet.
I could probably zoom in a little bit more on that as well. Let's do one more. Perfect. So this is another brochure that's offered by, that can be found on the Steady website. And this is a home safety checklist. Okay, so these are all things that they recommend to increase safety at home, some hazards that should be checked to increase your safety. So we're just going to run through this and chat about it and see what questions you have. Are there things that you can identify in your own home that may potentially be hazardous? So first is stairs and steps, both inside and outside. Do you have any objects currently on your stairs? Any papers piling up, laundry baskets. I know that's a big one in our house that need to be taken up or down the stairs. Are some steps broken or uneven? That's typically outdoors, maybe on an older set of concrete steps that may have shifted, or wooden steps that have given way. Is there a light and or light switch at the top and the bottom of the steps, so that before you ever even attempt to go down, you could turn on a light to light up that path. One thing that's becoming more and more common, I've seen them in a lot of houses that I'm in, is lights that are motion active. So as soon as you cross in front of that light, it lights up. So you don't even have to worry about setting up a light switch and running electrical and everything else. You can just, it mounts right onto your wall, battery operated. Sometimes it can be very hard for someone who's visually impaired to be able to see every individual step as they go down. So some recommendations that we'll make is either like different colored tape or some type of tape color that contrasts the rest of the step so that they can easily identify the edge of the step as they're stepping down. I'll share a story about that. I was at a conference and it was a really nice conference. The whole center was really nice, but they had these steps going down. They were marble stairs, and the step marble and the landing were all the same material. And they actually had to send 3 people out to the hospital that day because they slipped coming down that last step. They weren't able to, they were having a conversation or couldn't tell, and they stepped down, didn't realize that they were on the last step, or they missed the last step and they fell. Which is wild, and they were all, reasonably healthy working individuals. So that's just a plug to make the steps a little safer. So floors, when you walk through them, let me move that over a little bit. When you walk through a room, do you have to walk around furniture? So are your normal walkways, are they clear of any clutter or furniture? This is always a big one. If you've ever been to physical therapy, I'm sure you've been asked this before. Do you have any throw rugs in your home? There's always a lot of debate about rugs. You see them a lot. They'll sit in front of sinks in the kitchen and in the bathroom. Those rightfully have a place because you have a lot of water spillage there. You obviously don't want water to spill on your floor. So that might be a good place where throw rugs could be, is in the kitchen in front of the sink or in front of the sink in the bathroom. But outside of that, throw rugs on the floor, they present as a pretty big tripping hazard. If you do want to keep them there, using double-sided tape or a non-slip backing to the rug so it doesn't slip as you step on it. Are there papers, shoes, books, or other objects on the floor? So again, just making sure that the floors are clear of any clutter. And do you have to walk over any type of wires, extension cords, phone cords, whatever they may be? In the kitchen, keeping things that you often use on lower shelves, so you're not always having to reach up or get up onto a stool or a step stool. We see that at the time. People climbing up onto step stools when they probably shouldn't have been and ultimately fall off. Is your step stool sturdy? If you must use a step stool, get one with a bar to hold on to. That's a really, really good tip. They make step stools that have a bar on the side of it so you can hold on for a little bit of support as you're reaching up into your cabin. Before I keep scrolling, do we have any questions about home setup so far? Is there anything that's kind of stuck out to you guys in your home that's on this list? Anything that you think you might change after hearing this?
Animals.
Animals, yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. We'll never change that. We'll never change that. I have a cat and dog at home, and my dog's a big hazard. She's a nestle whenever someone comes in to visit, so I got to keep her contained sometimes.
It's so easy to trip on a dog,
Yeah, they just,
especially at night.
yep, at night, they just want to be right in the middle of the action. Yeah, we see that happen quite a bit. Yep, but we won't change
No.
it. What else? Are there any other things that popped up on the list that you think you may change, or that you saw and you're like, why is that even on there? Or does it make a lot of sense? Let's scoot over to this last column here. See what else we can identify. Bedrooms. So we talked about this already, but definitely good to revisit. Is the light near the bed hard to reach? And so before you even have to get out of bed, can you turn the light on? Or do you have to walk through a dark room to get to the light? Is the path from your bed to the bathroom dark? So putting in a night light so you can see where you're walking. Some night lights go on by themselves after dark. So those would be some really good things to consider. And then lastly, in your bathroom. I'm just curious here, as far as the bathroom goes, by show of hands, how many people have like the tub shower combo where you have to step up over the high lift and get in? Just about everybody. Okay. So no one really has like just a walk-in shower that you can get into, one walk-in shower. Do you guys have any grab bars that you can hold on to get in and out? Yes, grab bars, yes, yeah. Are they mounted into the molding, or are they like the stick-on ones?
There's
Stick-on.
molded on the side of the tub,
Okay.
but I have a question about the one up near the shower head.
Yeah.
Would you prefer a straight one, or would you prefer an angled one, or do you have any preferences?
I don't. I think that would all be kind of personal preference. I think the vertical ones are a little bit easier because you can pull a little bit better. And that seems to be a little bit more reliable than a horizontal one and trying to bracing yourself on. So I think the vertical ones work a little bit nicer to grab a hold and you've got to step in or whatever.
I'm just referring to standing in the tub.
Just standing, then personal preference at that point versus horizontal or angled, whatever.
The animal we have, like I said, it slides down over the edge of the tub.
Mhm.
It bolts up tight.
Okay, yep.
And then it's got a big U on the side so you can help yourself into the tub.
Hold it, get in and out. Perfect. Yeah, those are nice. Yes.
How effective are the ones that are just suction cups?
For the ease of installment, I have never seen one thing. So everything that I've read, everything that I have found, I mean, they're obviously never going to be as sturdy or as reliable as ones that are mounted all the way through and into the studs. But I have never seen or heard anyone say that they've had theirs fail. I personally set one up, and we have one in our grandparents, well, my grandparents' bathroom, and it was great for them. So as far as ease of setup goes, I think they're great. I'm sure there's stories out there where they have failed. I mean, I think they at least would have had to at some point. It can't be as reliable as the ones you can actually mount, but I have never heard of that thing. So, any other questions about bathroom stuff, bathroom setup?
I actually wanted to go back to the bedroom one.
Yeah.
Would you recommend putting like a clapper device on a lamp or something if it's hard to reach?
Mhm.
Would that be a way to get around it?
Yeah. So she had asked if we would recommend like some type of sound activation to turn on the light. And that's what's so cool about technology now is there's so many options out there. You know, clapper, an Alexa, you can program Alexas to turn on lights. There's switches that you can get, like remote switches that can control different outlets that can turn on lights. There's so many options out there, and all of those are good. You know, as long as the person using it knows how to use it, all super effective. Or just putting a lamp on the bedside table. So as you're getting out of bed, you can just turn that on. Yeah, I mean, we live in a day and age where technology has made things super easy for us. So being able to use something like that could be really, really valuable. Oh no, come back. Wake up. Oh no, oh there. Okay. Any other questions about home setup at all? Okay. We have at least a few more minutes, right, Joe?
Yep.
Go back to my PowerPoint here. Okay, so just a few closing comments here. Oh, let me pull it up. And this is just me from more of my soapbox, as I've spent a lot of time working with older adults and working with family members. And this topic is always a point of friction for older adults and their adult children now at this point. And I want to make sure and really drive home the point that as the children of the older adult, we're being supported. We're supporting our parents, and we're not coming from a place of you need to do this, you need to do that. Because what happens is we have seen so many falls go unreported. Because what happens is that older adult is fearful to report their fall to loved ones, to healthcare providers, because they're fearful that that fall is going to end up in them maybe losing some of their independence. They might be forced to move out of their home. There's that big stigma out there that falls are the end of the world. And I understand 100% that as the child, we want to do everything right by our parents to make sure that they are safe at home and they're not at risk of any injury. But there's always risk. There's always a risk that they can fall. We need to understand that. And our role as advocates for our older adults, our aging parents, is that we need to figure out how to make them as safe as possible, but also allow them to still enjoy their independence. And there's always a fine line in that. So I just challenge everybody to be very open and have that dialogue with your loved ones to make sure that you're having a good system where you guys are communicating back and forth to make sure that they feel comfortable sharing that they had a fall so that they can get the help that they need. I've seen it firsthand so many times where older adults will confide in me that they have fallen, but they're afraid to share that with anyone else because they don't want to get moved into a nursing home, or they don't want their son to strap them down to the chair, or whatever kind of crazy thing that they think might happen. But it's really important. It's really important to listen and understand, but don't threaten. Mom, if you fall one more time, you can't get up unless I'm at home. I've heard people say that, and I know it's a good intention, but it has a lot of negative impacts. One of the biggest fears, or one of the biggest risks of falling, is that fear of falling. And by having those negative conversations, we're feeding into that fear, and it leads to even more unsafe situations. That's just my soapbox and my small little plug to make sure that I know we're always coming from a good place, but make sure that we understand that there's always risk involved, and there's definitely we want to keep our older adults safe. We want to keep our parents safe, but at the same time, we want to help them celebrate their independence as well. That's super important to them. It's one of the last things that people want to do. So finding a good middle ground is super important. With that, does anyone have any other questions, comments, concerns for me while I'm here? Yes.
something from experience, as you work with your parents or, your loved ones, try to recognize their tells. My mother wouldn't tell me when she was having a vertigo issue,
Mhm.
but she had 2 tells. And sometimes she didn't really recognize it as vertigo. She would finger walk as she walked through things, lightly touching whatever. So, but the other thing was, and it happened in the doctor's office, and he had asked her if she was having, any, no. And he moved his hand, and she shut her eyes and put her head down. And that was one of her big tells, that she was actually having vertigo at that point.
Mm.
And, it was just, once they recognized that, it made it easier, though she didn't think she was having. For us, it was like, are you dizzy? No. Then, but she would do this, and she would turn away from the movement that she was seeing,
Right.
because it was making her dizzy.
Mhm.
And if somebody has vertigo, keep your hand movements to a minimum, because that will set them off.
Right. Exactly.
Learn from experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
Those
Oh,
are
yeah.
good
My
points.
mom it was hard. It was, yeah, if you talk with your hands, put them in your pockets.
Yeah, really good. Yes.
Do you have any advice for people who are resistant to doing exercise or physical therapy?
Yeah, there's
25 people have said you really should do this and blah blah blah, and it's false science. I don't need it. Blah
Yeah.
blah blah.
Yeah, there's always going to be that, and a big piece of it is educate, and share that knowledge with them. But at the end of the day, they have to be the ones to make the decision. Because what's going to happen is someone can come help them with exercise for a little bit, but then there's going to be no carryover afterward. So we need to meet them where they're currently at. So maybe it's first just trying to establish some type of goal. Is there a hobby that they enjoy doing? Is there just anything that they might find some fulfillment in doing, joy in doing? And then looking at, okay, is there a way that we can tie some type of exercise or activity to that certain event or that hobby? That can sometimes be a creative way to, encourage some level of exercise. So if it's going to a store, going to a restaurant, encouraging as much walking as you can to and from them, going there more frequently to get some more walking. But that's typically where you need to start with that person, is try to find some underlying goal that's in there that might help to motivate them a little bit more. Or sometimes just having a conversation about their independence and sharing with them, this is something that's super important that you need to do if you want to remain independent at home and all of that. But at the end of the day, they have to make that decision too, which is challenging because they sometimes don't get there.
Is there any reading material or anything that I could, or a website or something that would show? Because they're not believing that it's true,
Yeah.
and that's it's hard to.
For me, I've often found that doctors can really be a really good person to drive something home. So maybe a day or two before your loved one's next primary care doctor visit, maybe give them a call and say, hey, mom or dad's not doing as much as they really should as far as activity at home. Would you be open to explaining to them why that's important? I have found at least that mom and dad can say something. I can say something as a physical therapist. Dr. Oz, well, I should say Dr. Oz because he is a doctor. Someone on TV could say something super important, but it's not going to matter until my doctor in the white coat right in front of me says it. And then, oh, yeah, I should exercise. And then it's like, yeah, that makes sense. So that might be something to try as well. Any other questions?
Mitch,
Awesome.
thank you so much
Yeah.
for a great
I just want to tell our folks here and also those folks that are online watching us, if you have more questions about ACAP, go to acapcommunity.org. There's a lot of information there. There's a lot of podcasts there too. And actually this presentation will go online. You can go to a YouTube channel and watch this again if you so choose. There's a resource table in the back. We have the latest, what I call Green Book, that gives all kinds of information from home health care agencies to places like a CCRC or a personal care home. It talks about an ombudsman that is your representative. And it also back there, there's a sheet that has our calendar for the upcoming year. And while it may change, we try to stick to everything there. So we hope you take advantage. I'm sorry if anybody at home was watching and would be interested in getting our calendar, I would probably say contact acapcommunity.org and they will in turn contact the Center County chapter and we can get that to you. So thank you so much. Thanks everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Where's your office?
So we technically